You see, the great misunderstanding of our age is that intelligence is a matter of accumulation, that the smarter you are, the more facts you carry. But let us consider, what if intelligence is not the weight of knowledge, but the lightness of awareness? What if becoming smarter isn't about adding more noise, more opinions, more clutter, but about removing the mental static that drowns out the signal of real perception? Because the truly dangerous mind is not the one that knows the most, but the one that sees the clearest. So let's explore a different kind of intelligence, the kind that arises not from trying harder, but from seeing deeper, from stillness, from presence, from unlearning everything you were told intelligence was supposed to be. Let's begin. The illusion of intelligence is perhaps the most deeply embedded and least questioned myth of the modern mind. You are taught from a young age that intelligence is something to be pursued, measured, and displayed. You gather degrees like badges, memorize facts like ammunition, and speak with eloquence to sound learned. But all of this is merely the decoration of intellect, not the essence of it. True intelligence, authentic, primal, untamed awareness, is not about what you know, but how clearly you see. It is not about the cleverness of your answers, but the clarity of your presence. Most people are not intelligent, they are conditioned. Their minds are a museum of borrowed thoughts. They have not awakened to the deep mystery of their own consciousness because they are too busy quoting others. You are told intelligence is IQ, test scores, academic achievement. Yet look around. The world is filled with intelligent fools, people who can recite data, win debates, and solve puzzles, but who lack wisdom, depth, or peace. Their minds are sharp but shallow. They know everything about the world and nothing about themselves. The real danger lies in mistaking mental speed for mental depth. The fast mind often becomes a reactive mind, a mind unable to pause, observe, or reflect. And so true intelligence is hidden behind a veil of intellectual busyness. The person who appears smart in conversation may be merely rehearsing an identity, but the person who sits quietly, listening not just to the words but to the silence between them, this is the one who sees the deeper current of things. So what is this brain hack that makes you smarter, more dangerous? It is the death of illusion, the peeling away of every lie you've inherited about what thinking is supposed to be. It is the realization that you do not become intelligent by adding more thoughts to your mind, but by questioning the very foundation of your thought itself. The smartest man in the room is not the one who talks the most. It's the one who sees the game being played and no longer plays it blindly. You become dangerous not by shouting louder, but by understanding deeper. And that understanding begins with stepping outside the prison of social conditioning. You've been trained to value appearances over awareness, certainty over curiosity, answers over questions. Break that pattern, and the mind awakens. Intelligence is not something to be shown off. It is something to be used. Like a blade, it cuts through illusion. It does not seek comfort. It seeks truth. And the truth, once seen clearly, is rarely what the crowd is cheering for. Most people are not seeking truth. They are seeking validation. They want to feel right, not to be real. But when you decide to see clearly, to observe without agenda, you step into a level of intelligence that is rare and powerful. You become someone who notices what others miss. You detect patterns in chaos. You listen not only to what is said, but to what is not said. You read people the way others read books, and you see the lies society tells to keep itself asleep. This is dangerous. Why? Because a truly intelligent person is not easily manipulated. You cannot be guilted into submission. You cannot be herded with slogans. You do not respond to fear the way others do. You no longer need someone to think for you, lead you, or tell you who you are. And that makes you a threat to every system that thrives on unconscious compliance. Intelligence is not just the capacity to solve problems, it is the ability to see through them. Most people look at life and ask, how can I fix this? But the intelligent mind pauses and asks, is this even real? Is this problem constructed by my own conditioning? That pause, that gap between reaction and response, is where higher intelligence lives. You do not have to try harder to be smarter. You have to see differently. It's not about speeding up your mind, it's about clearing it. Think of a mirror. The mirror doesn't become more accurate by working harder. It reflects truly only when it is still and clean. Your mind is the same. When you drop the noise, the pretense, the performance, suddenly insight arises, not from effort, but from space. The mind becomes a lens through which the infinite expresses itself. And in that space, you realize you never had to become intelligent. You only had to stop pretending to be unintelligent. To understand this, the real hack is not in gaining anything, it is in stripping away the false. The false self, the false beliefs, the false identity you cling to in order to appear smart. Let it all fall. Let it burn. Stand naked before the unknown, and you will find that intelligence is not something you own. It is something that flows through you. And the moment you stop trying to be impressive, you become dangerous, not because you know more, but because you need less. You no longer require approval to act. You no longer seek permission to think. You no longer shrink yourself to fit into other people's boxes. This is the intelligence the world fears, the clarity of a free mind, a mind that questions without apology, a mind that sees without distortion, a mind that listens deeply, speaks deliberately, and moves from a center that is not bound by fear. You were never meant to fit in, you were meant to see. And in that seeing, your mind becomes a sword, not to harm, but to carve paths where others see only walls. And so the great paradox is revealed. To become 50% smarter and infinitely more dangerous, you must stop trying to become anything at all. You must see what is, and when you truly see, you'll realize you always were. The world today moves in a frantic rhythm, constantly asking you to speed up, to respond quicker, to always be thinking, solving, chasing, proving. And in this restless pursuit of productivity, something ancient and vital is lost. Stillness. But stillness, you see, is not laziness. It is not idleness. It is a forgotten state of supreme power. In a world addicted to noise, the one who becomes quiet becomes powerful. The one who dares to be still begins to listen, not to the surface, but to the source. Stillness is not the absence of thought, but the awareness of it. It is the space between thoughts where clarity lives. And this is the brain hack no one tells you about. To become sharper, you must first become still. The smartest minds throughout history were not the ones who reacted quickly, but the ones who paused deeply. They stepped outside the river of noise and looked at it from the shore. Because when you are inside the flow of endless distraction, your mind is not your own. It is being pulled, shaped, dictated by whatever is loudest. But when you choose stillness, when you shut the door, turn off the noise, and sit with yourself, you begin to notice things others never see. Patterns emerge. Truth rises. You stop being a puppet of your environment and become an observer of it. And the observer is always more intelligent than the participant, because the observer is free. Stillness is how you sharpen the blade of the mind. It is where awareness stops chasing and starts receiving. In silence, you start to hear the true voice, not the one trained by culture, fear, and repetition, but the one that has always been beneath it all. Your mind becomes like a pool of water. When agitated, it distorts the reflection. But in stillness, the surface clears, and you can see the bottom. That is what intelligence requires. Not more motion, but more depth. And you do not get depth by digging frantically. You get it by staying in one place long enough to let the truth settle. Stillness is not passive, it is intensely active beneath the surface. It is where the real rewiring of the brain begins. When you stop filling the space with constant thought, your mind starts to reorient itself. New neural paths form, not out of repetition, but out of revelation. This is not something schools teach, because schools reward answers, not awareness. They reward memorization, not contemplation. But what you truly need is not to think faster, it's to see clearer. And that clarity doesn't come in a rush. It comes when you have the courage to stop. Most people fear stillness because in it all their distractions die. And without those distractions, they are forced to face themselves, their anxiety, their doubt, their lack of purpose. But that confrontation is the doorway to higher intelligence, because until you understand the inner world, no amount of information about the outer world will save you. The still mind does not panic. It sees beyond the present moment. It senses patterns, not just problems. It doesn't just react to life, it reads it. It doesn't speak to impress, it listens to understand. And when it speaks from a place that can silence a room. To become dangerous in the world, not with violence, but with insight. You must reclaim stillness as your foundation. You must become the one who no longer chases every flicker of emotion or noise. You must be willing to sit when everyone else runs, to listen when everyone else speaks, to watch when everyone else flinches. Because in that stillness, your awareness grows roots. It doesn't sway in the wind of trend or opinion. It becomes anchored. And from that anchor, your intelligence flows. Not from effort, but from presence. There is a power that only the still possess. A power that comes from knowing who you are when there is no one to impress. When the mind is still, the heart speaks. When the mind is still, decisions become clear. And when the mind is still, fear loses its grip. Imagine how much mental energy is wasted every day by reactivity, anxiety, and the need to be first or best. Stillness reclaims all of that wasted energy and turns it into insight. And that's when your intelligence becomes visible, not because you shout, but because you know. Stillness is also the key to intuition. You cannot hear the quiet voice of your inner knowing if your mind is cluttered with noise. But once the noise fades, intuition rises like a forgotten memory. It tells you when to move, when to wait, what's real and what's false. It's a knowing beyond logic, a direct channel to the deep intelligence of life itself. And that knowing is what makes you unpredictable, powerful, and wise. Because you no longer rely solely on thinking, you have begun to sense. People often ask, how can I be smarter? How can I level up my thinking? But they're asking the wrong question. The better question is, how can I get quiet enough to hear the intelligence that's already within me? You don't need to chase ideas. You need to become empty enough for the right ones to arrive. The world does not need more clever minds. It needs more still ones. Minds that do not react out of fear, but respond out of truth. And minds that are not addicted to motion, but anchored in clarity. Stillness is the furnace where all the false parts of you burn away. In it you will face discomfort. You will want to reach for distraction. You will feel restless, uncertain, exposed. But stay there. Stay with it. because just beyond the discomfort is awakening. And that awakening will not make you louder, it will make you wiser. It will not make you frantic, it will make you certain. The world may call you slow, but in truth you will be the sharpest mind in the room, because while others are echoing noise, you will be speaking from silence. And silence, when it is alive with awareness, speaks louder than any scream. So do not fear stillness. Seek it. Cherish it. Make it your secret weapon. For in the quiet, your mind is reborn, not as a collection of thoughts, but as a beacon of insight. And that kind of mind, that kind of presence, is not just smart, it is unstoppable. Awareness is a strange thing. It is not intelligence in the way the world defines it. It is not about logic or reasoning or how fast you can compute information. It is something deeper, older, more primal. Awareness is the quiet knowing that exists before words. It is the space behind thought. And while the world celebrates those who have answers, those who can argue, debate, and prove, the truly powerful mind is not obsessed with answers. It is rooted in awareness, because answers change, but awareness sees. The irony is this: the person who constantly seeks answers is often just trying to escape uncertainty. They want control, they want predictability, they want a mental map that will protect them from life's chaos. But the mind that is awake understands that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. And mysteries do not need answers. They require presence. This is the brain hack no one talks about. Stop obsessing over what is right and start observing what is. The moment you shift from needing certainty to embracing awareness, your mind evolves. You begin to notice how much of your life is lived on autopilot, how many beliefs you inherited rather than examined, how many reactions you call choices that were never truly chosen. Awareness breaks the loop. It interrupts the pattern. It asks, wait, why am I doing this? Who told me this is true? Is this thought even mine? In that moment of questioning, intelligence is born. Not because you have an answer, but because you are no longer asleep. The awake mind may still be uncertain, but it is no longer blind. It sees the matrix for what it is. Most people believe intelligence is about solving problems, but intelligence is really about perceiving reality clearly. If you are solving problems based on illusions, what good are your solutions? They only fix the surface while leaving the root untouched. Awareness doesn't fix, it reveals. And in that revelation, the mind begins to self-correct. You stop needing to be right. You stop arguing for your limitations. You simply notice, and through that noticing, transformation begins. Without effort, without force, simply by the light of awareness. The reason awareness makes you smarter is because it detaches you from identity. You're no longer trying to defend a version of yourself. You're no longer thinking in order to protect your ego. And when that happens, you become honest. Not just with others, but with yourself. Brutally honest, painfully honest. You begin to see how much of your mental activity is driven by fear, pride, shame, or desire. And in that raw seeing, a new space opens up, clarity. That clarity isn't loud. It doesn't come with flashing lights. It's subtle, like the sunrise. But once it rises, you can't unsee it. Awareness is the upgrade. It is the original intelligence, before the layers of culture, schooling, and expectation were piled on top of you. When you are aware, you don't just react, you respond. You feel the emotion, but are not ruled by it. You hear the criticism, but are not broken by it. You observe your own mind like a sky watching clouds. Thoughts pass, but you are not the storm. And this distance, this inner space, is what makes you so powerful, because the one who is aware cannot be manipulated. They are not controlled by the news, by trends, by the need to belong. They belong to something deeper, the truth of the moment. This kind of intelligence is dangerous to systems that rely on conformity. Schools want students who obey, governments want citizens who agree, religions want followers who do not ask too many questions. But the aware mind asks the dangerous questions, not out of rebellion, but out of sincerity. Is this true? Is this helpful? Is this me? And in asking, you cut through the noise. You stop being a product of your environment and become a creator within it. That is the beginning of real freedom. But awareness is not easy. It requires discipline, not in the sense of control, but in the sense of attention. You must train your awareness like a muscle. You must learn to observe without judgment, without conclusion. Just watch, just witness. In the beginning, this feels pointless. You'll want to go back to thinking, solving, analyzing. But stay with it, because slowly your vision clears. You start to see the patterns, not just in the world, but in yourself. You begin to recognize the loops, the same thought, the same fear, the same self-doubt. And when you see it clearly, you no longer believe it. You are no longer caught in it. You smile, you nod, and you move through it. That is intelligence, not the accumulation of thought, but the transcendence of it. The mind is a useful servant, but a terrible master, and awareness is what places the mind back into service. You think when needed, you analyze when appropriate, but you are no longer consumed by the compulsive need to think. That is what makes you calm in chaos, what makes you unshakable, because your intelligence is not something you do, it is something you are. The people who walk through life with a quiet power, a calm confidence, they are not always the loudest or most educated, but they are the most aware. They read the room without speaking. They sense deception without proof. They see opportunity where others see risk, not because they are magical, but because they are present. They are paying attention. While others are trapped in their own stories, they are listening to reality itself. And reality, if you listen closely, always tells the truth. So if you want to become smarter, truly smarter, stop back from the chase for answers. Stop needing to be right. Stop rushing to conclusions. Practice awareness. Observe your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs. Question everything, especially yourself. And in that deep, sustained awareness, intelligence begins to awaken, not as something new, but as something ancient you had simply forgotten. You don't need to become more, you need to become aware. Because the clearest mind in the room is not the one shouting, it's the one seeing. Your brain is not a storage unit. It was never meant to be a dusty warehouse of trivia, dates, formulas, and disconnected facts. And yet, that's how most people treat it, as a container to be filled rather than an instrument to be played. From the moment you enter school, you're taught to memorize, to retain, to cram information until your mind becomes heavy with things you don't even understand. But this is not intelligence. This is intellectual hoarding. True intelligence comes when you stop trying to carry everything and start learning how to tune the mind like a finely crafted instrument. Because the brain is not here to be full, it is here to be sharp. Think of a violin in the hands of a master. It doesn't matter how expensive the instrument is if it's out of tune. It produces noise, not music. And so it is with the mind. When your brain is cluttered with fear, distraction, comparison, and mental noise, even the most powerful intellect will sound off-key. But when you begin to tune the mind, when you learn what to remove, what to focus on, and how to hold your attention, you start producing clarity, insight, depth. And that kind of mind, that kind of clarity, is far more valuable than a million stored facts. The problem is that we've confused data with wisdom. We believe that if we collect enough information, we'll be safe, we'll be smart, we'll be ahead. But all that information without clarity is like having a sword and no skill to wield it. You cut wildly, without purpose. You react instead of respond. You think without understanding. The real hack is not in knowing more. It's in knowing how to use what you already know. That is what tuning the mind does. It strips away the unnecessary and amplifies the essential. The untuned mind is reactive. It's constantly jumping from one thought to another, one worry to the next. It's like trying to play music on an instrument that's constantly changing its shape. No consistency, no control. You might get bursts of brilliance, but no lasting power. But a tuned mind is deliberate. It's calm without being dull. It's focused without being rigid. It knows when to act and when to wait. It knows how to drop a thought as easily as it picks one up. And that flexibility, that inner poise, is what makes it intelligent. But tuning the mind requires practice. It requires silence. It requires subtracting more than adding. Most people fill their minds every day with social media, news, gossip, and noise. And they wonder why they can't focus, why they feel anxious, why their creativity is dying. Your mind, like an instrument, responds to what you expose it to. If you feed it garbage, it becomes a garbage bin. But if you feed it space, depth, and presence, it becomes a channel, a source, a mirror for insights. We must stop treating thinking as a mechanical process. The brain is not a machine. It is a living, evolving awareness tool. It does not just process information, it creates meaning. It links the inner world with the outer. But it cannot do this when it's bloated with noise. The musician doesn't clutter the stage with every instrument available. They choose the few they can master. Likewise, the intelligent mind learns to say no. It learns to let go. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every question needs an answer. Some things need only to be noticed and released. When your mind is tuned, you begin to sense the right frequency of life. You feel when to move and when to pause. You no longer overthink every decision because your intuition has space to speak. You begin to act with precision, not panic, because your mind is no longer fighting itself. It's aligned. And this alignment makes you unpredictable, powerful, and deeply aware. Others are rushing, fumbling, reacting. You're still, centered, focused. That is what makes you smarter. Not more thought, but better thought. Not more knowledge, but deeper knowing. People will often mistake this kind of intelligence for simplicity. They may say you're too quiet, too slow to speak, too unwilling to jump into every conversation. But what they don't see is that your silence is not emptiness. It is sharpening. You are listening not just to reply, but to understand. And when you speak, your words cut through the fog like a blade. Because you're not regurgitating, you're revealing. You are not echoing others. You are tuning into something deeper. This kind of intelligence cannot be faked. It comes from within, from discipline, from introspection, from intentional living. It comes from treating your mind not like a chaotic inbox, but like a sacred instrument. You tune it with the books you read, the silence you keep, the questions you ask, the people you surround yourself with, and the energy you protect. You begin to realize that clarity is more valuable than cleverness, that simplicity is more powerful than sophistication, that your mind is not meant to be admired, It is meant to be mastered. So if you want to become smarter, more dangerous, more clear, stop chasing more thoughts. Start tuning your mind. Start subtracting the noise. Start practicing stillness. Learn to notice your patterns. Learn to drop the thoughts that weaken you. Learn to protect your energy like a musician protects their hands. You are not just a thinker. You are a creator, a conductor. And the better you tune your instrument, the more beautiful and powerful the music of your life becomes. Your brain is a creature of habit. It loves familiarity, patterns, and the safety of repetition. Most people live their lives inside loops they didn't consciously choose, patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior that were installed early and left unchallenged. These loops feel comfortable, predictable, even safe. But safety is the enemy of growth. Comfort is the cage of potential. If you want to become smarter, sharper, more powerful, if you want to be truly dangerous in the best sense of the word, you must become a conscious pattern breaker. You must develop the courage to interrupt your own programming. Most people don't live, they replay. They wake up with the same thoughts they had yesterday. They talk about the same problems, argue with the same people, react to the same triggers, and they call this life. But it's not life, it's automation. The mind becomes like a scratched record, stuck on the same track, repeating it so often that it starts to feel like truth. But repetition is not truth. Familiarity is not wisdom. A thought you've had 1,000 times doesn't become right just because it's old. It becomes a prison. And until you become aware of that prison, you'll keep decorating the walls instead of breaking them down. Conscious pattern breaking begins with observation. You must become the witness of your own mind. Notice your thoughts, not as facts, but as habits. Begin to ask, is this reaction automatic? Is this belief something I've tested, or something I've inherited? Am I thinking this because it's real, or because it's familiar? These are dangerous questions to ask, not because they harm you, but because they shatter illusions. They burn away the parts of your identity that were built on borrowed ideas. And when that false self begins to die, a new intelligence is born. An intelligence that is agile, alive, and entirely your own. You cannot be truly smart if you are enslaved by unconscious patterns. Intelligence is not just the ability to think, it's the ability to notice the thinking itself, to see the mechanism of thought and choose whether or not to obey it. The average person doesn't choose their thoughts, they are chosen by them. They don't respond to life, they react. And the reactions are always predictable, always programmed. Someone insults you, you feel anger. Someone disagrees, you feel defensive. You fail at something, you spiral into shame. These are not intelligent responses, they are emotional echoes from the past. To become dangerous is to become unpredictable, not in the sense of chaos, but in the sense of freedom. When you can no longer be predicted by your past, you are finally living. You are no longer a script being read. You are the author, writing in real time. This requires presence, vigilance, and the willingness to feel uncomfortable. Because breaking patterns will always feel wrong at first. Your brain is wired for efficiency, not truth. It would rather repeat a bad habit than learn a new one, because learning is expensive. It costs energy, it demands awareness, and most people are too tired, too distracted, or too afraid to pay the price. But if you do, if you become the kind of person who interrupts their own patterns, you will awaken a kind of intelligence most never touch. You will begin to see choice where others see destiny. You will feel space inside moments that used to crush you. You'll be able to hold your tongue when you used to lash out. You'll pause before reacting. You'll respond with clarity, not compulsion. And this is what makes you dangerous, because no one can control a person who responds from awareness instead of programming. You become the type of person who can shift direction instantly, not out of fear, but out of vision. You no longer need to defend your past because you are not trapped in it. You are fluid, adaptable, alive. This mental fluidity is the mark of a truly sharp mind. The rigid mind, the one that clings to its patterns and labels and beliefs, may look strong, but it shatters under pressure. The flexible mind bends, adjusts, reorients. It doesn't resist change. It reads it and moves with it. And the secret is, pattern breaking is not dramatic. It's subtle. It's the choice to take a breath before speaking, to question the urge to prove yourself, to try a new response when the old one arises, to watch a painful thought instead of drowning in it. These small choices compound over time, and soon your mind is no longer running old scripts, it's creating new music. It's not echoing the past, it's composing the present. This shift doesn't just make you smarter, it makes you powerful, because when you master your patterns, you master your state, and your state determines your focus, your emotion, your energy, your outcome. Every external transformation begins as an internal shift, and every internal shift begins with the awareness. I don't have to do it this way anymore. So observe yourself like a scientist. Become fascinated by your own mind. Catch it in the act of being unconscious. Don't judge it. Just witness. And then choose. Choose differently. Even if it feels awkward, unfamiliar, wrong, especially then, because the discomfort is a sign that the pattern is breaking. And behind that discomfort is freedom. Your brain will resist. It will scream that the old way is safer. But you must remember, safety is the graveyard of genius. If you want to unlock your higher intelligence, you must risk letting go of who you've always been. Intelligence is not memorizing new answers. It's living from a new awareness. And the more you practice, the clearer it becomes. Your mind is not a fixed machine. It is a living mirror. It reflects whatever you dare to become. So break the loop, interrupt the story, step outside the pattern, not just once, but every day. Do this long enough and you'll find something extraordinary. You are not your habits. You are not your history. You are the awareness that rewrites it all. And that awareness, my friend, is the most dangerous force in the world. Presence is the most underestimated power in the modern world. In a society obsessed with multitasking, notifications, and constant stimulation, the individual who is fully present becomes almost superhuman. Most people are not really here. Their bodies walk through the day, but their minds are scattered across regrets of the past and projections of the future. They are divided, distracted, and drained. But when you become radically present, you reclaim the energy that is otherwise lost to mental time travel. You stop leaking your awareness into every possible direction, and instead focus it like a laser beam. That laser cuts through confusion. It sharpens your mind. It enhances your intelligence not by giving you more, but by giving you now. Presence is not a concept to be learned. It is an experience to be returned to. You were born present. Watch a child stare at a leaf, a bird, a puddle. Nothing exists but the moment. The world is alive, and so are they. But as you grow, you're taught to leave the moment behind. You're taught to plan ahead, analyze, anticipate, overthink. And slowly, you begin to believe that thinking about life is the same as living it, that thought is always past or future. Presence is only now. The thought is always past or future, most intelligent, most dangerous to those who thrive on your unconsciousness. Presence is power because it reveals. When you are fully present, you begin to see things others miss. You notice patterns, energies, inconsistencies in behavior. You read between the lines. You hear what someone isn't saying. You feel the room. You sense the atmosphere. While others are lost in their heads, calculating what to say next or how they appear, you are here, and here is where intuition speaks. Here is where clarity lives. Here is where decisions are made not from fear or ego, but from truth. To be radically present is to become deeply aware of your internal and external environment. It is to know what you feel and why. It is to be able to hold discomfort without needing to escape it. It is to look someone in the eye without fear. It is to respond, not react. And that subtle shift from reaction to response is where intelligence rises. Because a reactive mind is always a slave to its triggers. It cannot see clearly. It cannot choose freely. But a present mind pauses. It breathes. It waits. And in that waiting, wisdom comes. You don't need more information to be intelligent. You need less distraction. You need fewer windows open in your mind. You need to stop splitting your attention across 10 different fears, hopes, and fantasies. Radical presence is about total attention. It's about being where you are and letting that be enough. It doesn't mean you abandon the future or ignore the past. It means you stop being owned by them. You use the past as reference, not residence. You prepare for the future without being possessed by it. And in between them, you live fully, deeply, fiercely. The present moment has a strange effect on the mind. It simplifies, it clarifies. It brings everything into sharp focus. When you're here, really here, life stops being a problem to solve and becomes a reality to experience. Your mind stops spinning scenarios and starts listening. And when you listen without the filter of your past or the anxiety of your future, you start to see people and situations for what they actually are. That perception is dangerous to illusion. It is disruptive to control, because it means you can no longer be manipulated through fear, shame, or desire. You are anchored in truth, not swayed by noise. There is a sacred stillness in presence, a kind of internal silence that is not empty but alert. It feels like standing at the edge of a vast ocean and hearing every wave, every ripple, every breath of the wind. That level of sensitivity makes you powerful, not in a loud, aggressive way, but in a quiet, unshakable way. The world can be on fire, but you remain composed. People may try to provoke you, but you respond with clarity. Opportunities may arise, and because you're not distracted, you notice them and act decisively. This is not magic, it's presence. And anyone can access it. But few will, because it requires discipline. It requires the courage to be here without escaping. Most people are not present because presence forces them to feel, and what they feel, pain, confusion, emptiness, they'd rather avoid. So they escape into screens, noise, busyness, or drama. But every escape steals a little more intelligence. It dulls the blade of awareness. And soon they are reacting to life from 1,000 miles away, from the moment. To reclaim your mind, you must be willing to sit in the discomfort of presence, to face yourself without a filter, to let go of the addiction to distraction. Radical presence sharpens every mental faculty. Your focus deepens. Your memory improves. Your decision-making becomes cleaner. You stop second-guessing. You become rooted, not rushed. And from that rootedness, you begin to act with the kind of calm intensity that others can feel. People may not understand what's different about you, but they'll feel it. It's the weight of your presence, the fullness of your attention, the silence between your words. That silence speaks volumes. That stillness commands respect, not because you demand it, but because you embody it. To be present is to reclaim your power. To be radically present is to become dangerous, not in a destructive way, but in a liberating one. You become someone who sees clearly, speaks truthfully, and acts decisively. You are no longer a product of your distractions. You are a master of your awareness. And that mastery is the true mark of intelligence. Not how fast you think, not how much you know, but how deeply you see, how fully you live, how honestly you respond. So return to the now, return to your breath, return to your senses. In this moment is everything you were looking for out there. You don't have to chase clarity. You just have to stop running from the present. Because the most intelligent version of you is already here, waiting in the silence, watching in the stillness, speaking only when the moment is true. The voice inside your head that constantly questions your worth, doubts your every move, and interrupts your confidence is not your true self. It's a parasite that's been fed over time by fear, shame, and the opinions of others. That voice, the inner critic, is not a guide. It's a cage. It poses as intelligence, pretending to protect you from failure, but in truth, it only weakens you. It distorts your perception, hijacks your clarity, and convinces you that hesitation is wisdom. If you want to unlock your intelligence, your creative force, your ability to think clearly and act boldly, then the inner critic must be silenced, not negotiated with, not reasoned with, silenced. You were not born with that voice. A baby does not look in the mirror and criticize itself. A child does not doubt its worth unless it's taught to. That voice was installed by culture, by trauma, by careless words and repeated wounds. And now it lives inside you like an echo, looping at the worst times. Every time you think of trying something new, it whispers you're not ready. Every time you stand up to speak, it says you'll fail. Every time you reach for more, it tells you you're too much or not enough. This is not intelligence. This is self-sabotage. This is the mental equivalent of tying your own hands and wondering why you can't play. Real intelligence cannot emerge in a hostile environment. The brain does not flourish when under constant attack from within. It cannot access flow, insight, or clarity when it's constantly being interrupted by doubt. The inner critic creates static, noise, interference. It's like trying to read a book with someone screaming nonsense in your ear. You might catch a few lines, but you'll miss the meaning. That's what it's like to live under the rule of the inner critic. And most people don't even realize they're under that rule. They think the voice is telling them the truth, but it's not truth. It's programming. The most dangerous thing about the inner critic is that it wears the mask of reason. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It uses your language. It sounds like you. It sounds like logic. That's why it's so persuasive. But logic without compassion is cruelty. And the inner critic is ruthlessly cruel, always holding your past against you, always comparing you to others, always making you shrink to avoid being seen. It doesn't want you to grow. Growth threatens its control. Evolution silences it. And that's why it tightens its grip whenever you're about to level up. That's when the voice gets louder, not because it's right, but because it's scared. Silencing the inner critic is not an act of arrogance. It's an act of liberation. It's not about pretending to be perfect or blindly confident. It's about reclaiming the right to think clearly. It's about protecting the fertile space of your mind so that insight can arise without being trampled by fear. When the critic falls silent, something else emerges, a voice you forgot you had, a voice that is calm, steady, kind, and clear. That voice doesn't push you from fear, it pulls you from truth. It doesn't insult you, it instructs you. It doesn't belittle you, it builds you. That voice is your real intelligence. It's the part of you that is always known when to walk away, known what excites your soul, known what kind of person you were meant to become. But it's been buried under the rubble of criticism. To hear it again, you have to clear the space. You have to become ruthless, not with yourself, but with the voice that lies to you. Every time it shows up, don't argue with it. Just recognize it and remove your attention. Like a fire that dies without oxygen, the critic starves when ignored. Start noticing its patterns. When does it show up? What triggers it? What words does it use? How does it make you feel? Awareness is the first step, because once you become the observer of the critic, you are no longer its victim. You begin to separate your identity from its accusations. You begin to reclaim your right to think freely, to act boldly, to try without apology. And this is where your intelligence multiplies. Not because you're adding anything, but because you're removing what was blocking the light. Think of the greatest minds, artists, leaders, and creators. They were not free from criticism, but they did not let it become their internal compass. They didn't silence their genius to avoid disapproval. They risked looking foolish, failing publicly, being misunderstood. That's not recklessness. That's courage. And courage, paired with clarity, becomes genius. When your mind is no longer interrupted by your own doubt, it begins to work with incredible precision. Your ideas become sharper, your responses more accurate, your presence more magnetic. Why? Because you're no longer divided. You're whole. This is the brain hack no one talks about. The enemy is not ignorance. It's the inner voice that keeps you afraid to learn. The enemy is not lack of opportunity. It's the fear of stepping into it. The enemy is not that you're not smart enough. It's that you've been tricked into silencing your intelligence with self-judgment. Let go of the critic, and the floodgates open. You'll realize that clarity was never far. It was just being drowned out by noise. You don't need more opinions. You don't need more permission. You need silence. Internal silence. Not silence of thought, but silence of attack. When that silence comes, your mind is free to explore, to create, to connect. That's where flow begins. That's where confidence becomes natural. That's where intelligence stops being theoretical and starts becoming visible. You don't have to fight the critic. You have to stop identifying with it. Let it speak, but don't answer. Let it shout, but don't submit. Let it exist, but don't obey. And over time, it will grow weaker. Your clarity will grow stronger. And you'll begin to realize that intelligence is not something you build. It's something you uncover. It was always there, waiting underneath the noise. And now that the noise is gone, you are no longer just a thinker. You are a force. Confidence is not something you wait for. It is something you generate. Most people think confidence is a reward, something that comes after success, after mastery, after approval. They wait for proof before they believe in themselves. But this is the greatest trap of the mind. Waiting to be confident is like waiting to be brave before you step into the unknown. It never comes. Because real confidence does not come from outcomes. It comes from stepping into your power before the world gives you permission. The people who appear magnetic, intelligent, powerful, they are not waiting. They have decided. Confidence is not loudness, it is not arrogance, it is not a performance. It is the quiet, grounded knowing that says, I can handle whatever comes. That energy is rare, and it is unmistakable. When someone walks into a room with true confidence, people feel it, not because they demand attention, but because they don't need it. Their energy is not scattered outward, searching for validation. It's gathered inward, rooted, whole. And that inward gathering of energy is what sharpens the mind. It makes your thoughts cleaner, your speech more direct, your actions more intentional. Confidence clarifies. But this kind of confidence does not come from believing you'll never fail. It comes from knowing that failure can't define you. It is not born from the illusion of perfection, but from the acceptance of imperfection. The confident mind doesn't pretend to be flawless. It simply refuses to be controlled by fear, and that refusal is what gives it strength. It becomes immune to the opinions that weaken others. It does not seek to impress, it seeks to express. And in that expression, its intelligence shines. Most people live in mental cages of hesitation. They have ideas, but they don't speak. They feel something, but they don't act. They see opportunities, but they question if they're good enough. And in that pause, in that hesitation, the moment passes. This is how brilliance is wasted, not from lack of potential, but from lack of belief. The confident person doesn't wait until everything is perfect. They move. They trust that clarity will come in motion. They know that confidence is not the absence of doubt, but the ability to proceed in spite of it. The brain thrives in action. It sharpens under pressure. It adapts in movement. The more you act, the more feedback you gain. The more feedback you gain, the more clarity you develop, and clarity becomes confidence. But if you stay frozen, overthinking every step, you rob your brain of that evolution. You keep it safe, yes, but you also keep it small. A confident mind expands, not because it's fearless, but because it has trained itself to feel fear and move anyway. That training is everything. That is how confidence becomes a skill, not a trait. You do not need to be born bold. You do not need to feel certain. You need to begin. You need to speak when your voice shakes, act when your hands tremble, stand when your knees are weak, because every time you do, your nervous system rewires. Your brain stops associating fear with paralysis. It starts associating fear with opportunity. And suddenly your perception changes. You no longer fear discomfort, you seek it. You understand that discomfort is the gym of the mind. It's where real intelligence and resilience are forged. Confidence also allows for authenticity. When you trust yourself, you no longer need to wear a mask. You don't have to pretend to be someone else. You don't have to censor your voice or shrink your ideas. You can show up as you are, unfiltered, unedited, unapologetic. And that rawness, that realness is magnetic, because it is rare. In a world of image and illusion, confidence rooted in truth stands out like a flame in the dark. It speaks with weight. It walks with purpose. It thinks with precision. You cannot fake this kind of confidence. You might fool others for a moment, but you cannot fool your own nervous system. Real confidence must be felt. And it is felt not through affirmations alone, but through action. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, your confidence grows. Every time you show up when it would have been easier to hide, your confidence deepens. And when that confidence becomes habitual, your intelligence begins to bloom in ways you never imagined. Because your mind is no longer wasting energy on doubt. It's fully available to create, to solve, to express. This is why confidence makes you smarter, because when you believe in your ability to navigate the unknown, your mind becomes fearless in its exploration. You ask better questions, you take bolder risks, you think more independently. You don't second-guess every move. You refine as you go. And that mental freedom accelerates growth. While others are trapped in cycles of overthinking, you are already in motion, already learning, already becoming. Confidence also changes the way others respond to you, not because you manipulate them, but because energy doesn't lie. People can sense when you believe in what you're saying. They can feel when your words are coming from alignment rather than performance. That kind of communication pierces through defenses. It builds trust. It opens doors, not because you tried to impress, but because you were grounded in your truth. You do not need to wait for permission to become this version of yourself. You do not need to be perfect to speak, to act, to lead. You need to decide. You need to begin where you are, not with arrogance, but with ownership, not with certainty, but with courage. That courage will grow roots. Those roots will support your vision, and your vision, fueled by clarity, will become unstoppable. So don't wait to feel ready. Don't wait until the doubt is gone. Move while it's still there. Speak while your voice is unsure. Think with the belief that your ideas matter, because they do. You matter. Your perspective matters. But the world will not know it until you step forward, and when you do, when you decide to embody your worth, your confidence will no longer be a performance. And that presence will be the most intelligent, powerful thing in the room. There is a hidden intelligence in stillness, a sharpness in silence that most never discover because they are addicted to noise. The modern world has trained you to believe that value comes from being constantly active, constantly speaking, constantly doing. But the most powerful minds, the most intelligent presences, are not those who rush to fill the silence. They are the ones who can hold it. The ability to sit in stillness without needing to escape, to observe without immediately reacting, to listen without rushing to reply. That is a sign of mental mastery, because silence is not emptiness, it is space. And in space, clarity begins to form. The mind that is never still is like a turbulent sea. Its waters are muddy, unclear, incapable of reflection. But the mind that has learned to be still is like a calm lake, sensitive, reflective, aware. It sees deeply. It responds wisely. It moves deliberately. Most people are so uncomfortable with silence that they mistake it for weakness. They believe if they aren't constantly thinking, worrying, or planning, they're falling behind. But the opposite is true. The most powerful breakthroughs, the deepest insights, the most transformative decisions are born not in noise, but in quiet. Stillness is not laziness. It is not passivity. It is the art of non-reactivity. It is the strength to wait, to watch, to listen. It is the refusal to be pulled by every distraction or provoked by every emotion. It is presence distilled into its purest form. And in that presence, you begin to see the machinery of the world more clearly. You see how much of what people call thinking is just noise. You see how much of what passes for communication is just projection. And you realize that the more silent your mind becomes, the more intelligent your thoughts become. This kind of mental stillness doesn't mean you don't feel. It doesn't mean you don't think. It means you're no longer ruled by compulsive reaction. You created a space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies your power. That space is where discernment lives. That space is where true intelligence breathes. Without stillness, every thought becomes urgent, every emotion becomes truth, every opinion becomes a command. But with stillness you gain perspective. You can see the thought arise and choose not to follow it. You can feel the emotion swell and choose not to act on it. That choice is what separates the intelligent mind from the impulsive one. The world rewards those who can stay calm under pressure. The person who can maintain their internal stillness while everyone else is panicking will always appear more powerful, not because they have all the answers, but because they can hear what others can't. Stillness makes you a better listener, not just to others, but to yourself. You begin to hear your intuition. You begin to feel what's right, not just think it. And intuition, combined with clarity, becomes wisdom. It's not emotional. It's not reactive. It's not guesswork. It's the deep, quiet knowing that can only be heard when the noise dies down. Stillness is also the soil in which creativity grows. You can't force a brilliant idea to come while your mind is racing, distracted, or anxious. The most original ideas are not summoned. They are received. And to receive, you must be available. You must be still. You must make space. Great artists, inventors, mystics, and thinkers have always understood this. They step away from the noise, not to escape, but to attune. They know that silence is not a void. It is a channel. Through that channel flows insight, depth, and innovation. The reason most people never access this level of intelligence is because they fear stillness. They fear what will rise in the silence. They fear the unresolved emotions, the buried questions, the uncomfortable truths. But what you avoid in stillness only controls you in chaos. The brave are not those who always act. They are those who can sit quietly and face themselves. To be still is to become intimate with your own mind, and that intimacy leads to a kind of clarity that no amount of external knowledge can provide. There is a power in restraint, in not needing to rush, in not needing to respond to every opinion, in letting the noise pass you by. When you embody this kind of inner stillness, people sense something different in you. They feel a weight in your presence, a gravity, not because you're louder or more forceful, but because your energy is not scattered. It's contained. It's focused. It's clean, and in that cleanness there is power. Because clarity is rare, presence is rare, stillness is rare, and rarity is value. Stillness is a discipline. It must be practiced. At first your mind will resist. It will try to fill the space with thought, with worry, with memory, with fantasy, but over time, with patience, the noise begins to settle, and when it does, what's left is not emptiness, it's depth. It's awareness, it's intelligence in its most potent form. You don't have to renounce the world to find it. You just have to reclaim the space between moments, the breath before the answer, the pause before the reaction. That's where your power lives. In stillness you begin to see what truly matters. You stop reacting to every spark and start choosing where to burn. You become more efficient, more focused, more aware. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You act slower, but your actions are more precise. You may do less, but you accomplish more, because your mind is no longer scattered across distractions. It is centered, intentional, and aligned. So make time for stillness. Not just silence on the outside, but quiet on the inside. Let the noise settle. Let the mind breathe. Because it is only in that space that your highest intelligence can awaken. You don't need to force it. You don't need to chase it. You need only to make room. Stillness sharpens perception. Stillness refines thought. Stillness refines truth. And when truth arises, the mind becomes what it was always meant to be, not a storage unit, not a noise machine, but a mirror reflecting clarity, insight, and wisdom. That is the final brain hack. Not stimulation, not speed, but stillness.